Good morning. This is Andrew Place. I'm chairing this work group of the Energy Industry Revitalization work group. This morning's meeting, we're hybrid, in person and online. I think a few folks are yet to arrive, but just some preliminary notes. We're here at Johns Hopkins University, and I wanted to thank on behalf of the group for hosting us here today. Spectacular setting, and also a reminder of the history and the life of the economy of Maryland, not just sitting in an NDE. I will note, as I noted, that this is live streamed. We are recording this. This is a public meeting. Transcripts will be produced and put online. I will close everything out. We'll have a presentation this morning, and then 50 minutes for discussion, and a 10-minute public comment period, ending the day at 12:30. I asked that during the discussion part of this meeting that work group members are to be able to participate, but public participants here, we're not muting everybody, but please respect that the public comment period is reserved for the last 10 minutes of the meeting. With that, I will note that Stephanie Vo is here from the University of Maryland. She has a presentation for us. Stephanie, the floor is yours.
Should we do a roll call?
Oh, sorry. Come one step. Please, Stephanie will do the roll call for us.
Okay. I'll just go through the member names. Senator Malcolm Augustine, who's not here yet. Delegate Lily Chi. Andrew Place.
Present.
Heather Graham. Stephanie Kane.
Present virtually.
Jennifer Smith Funn. Nancy Sopko. Charles Washington. And Sarah Battisti.
See Sarah's online. You're muted, Sarah. No, you're present.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right. Stephanie.
Sorry, I'm here in place of Heather. This is Ryan Powell from Commerce.
Thank you, Ryan.
Yeah. Do you want me to share my screen? Okay. Well, good morning, everyone. I'm Stephanie Vo. I'm the Maryland Program Coordinator with the Center for Global Sustainability at the School of Public Policy at the University of Maryland. I'm here but on behalf of Dr. Kathleen Kennedy and the rest of the research team for this working group. This presentation kind of stems from the conversation that we had at the last working group. If we go to the next slide. So today we'll kind of return to that conversation that we were having about the statutory language, what we mean by small business, by the transition to renewable energy. So I'll be going over first the statutory language and kind of highlighting pieces within that, and then going through the definition of small businesses and showing you some of the data that we've already collected, and then opening it up to the discussion about what it means to transition to renewable energies. And we've developed sort of different levels of our understanding of the statutory language to help guide the conversation. So next slide. Yeah, so on this slide, I've just put out the statutory language about small businesses. This is word for word from the statute. And we've highlighted here pieces that we'll be talking about today, which primarily refers to the transition to renewable energy. And as you can see here, most of the language explicitly states transition to renewable energy. There is one last piece at the end in that last red text that says transition to renewable energy and new energy sources, which can open the door to considering other types of energy that we talked about, such as hydrogen. But just wanted to put this in front of everyone to see like what it actually says in statute and maybe open up the like how we can interpret that language. Thanks. Oh yeah. Thanks. And then the next slide talks about the definition of the small business. So we did discuss this in our last meeting, and we stated that we would take the federal definition of small business. The U.S. Small Business Administration does define that generally as businesses having fewer than 500 employees. So we have collected data from the Census Bureau's statistics of U.S. businesses, and this is the information that you see on this graph here. So the x-axis shows the different classifications of industries using the North American Industry Classification System, which is sort of the standard classification system that the U.S. Census Bureau uses. And on the y-axis, you'll see the number of firms within the state of Maryland in these industries. And so we've color-coded it so that you can see the different sizes of those firms, ranging from the smallest being 0 to 4 and the largest grouping being more than 500. And one big takeaway here is that you can see that a large number of these firms are quite small. And then again, looking at this, another takeaway would be seeing that the largest sectors of industry being that largest bar there, professional, scientific, and technical services, or healthcare and social assistance. So that really demonstrates that Maryland is very service-oriented, and so we should take that into account when we're thinking about the scope, which I'll discuss later. Another caveat that I'll note here is that the U.S. Small Business Administration does have differing size standards for industries, so we haven't exactly figured out how to use that or consider it as we're analyzing the data, but we're hoping, like, as conversations within this working group evolve, and we do want to consider different, if we want to expand that definition of what a small business is, that we'll be able to look more granularly at this data to consider the size standards for different industries that the SBA has. And I'll just note again also that within this study, we want to focus on small businesses, but and always show the larger business data, but maybe not analyze it in depth. But yeah, that's up for conversation. Next slide. So this is sort of the meat of the conversation here, that definition of what we mean by transition to renewable energies. We've laid out here a few different levels of interpretation. So the first being a very limited interpretation of transition to renewables, a transition from fossil fuel use in small businesses, which would primarily involve deployment of distributed solar, ending use of natural gas and propane within these small businesses, and any cost impacts associated with decarbonization of the electric grid. And within small businesses, that will primarily mean a change in price of electricity. If we were to expand that interpretation, I know we spoke about other energy resources that could be considered, including on-site energy storage that can be coupled with the distributed solar and wind, use of biofuels or hydrogen. And so that can be taken into consideration. And then there's also that broad interpretation of expanding the scope to include just, what are the impacts of overall electrification on small businesses and any actions needed to decarbonize those businesses. But I think we also, the research team would like to say that as we begin to take a more broad approach to this, especially with the overall electrification of small businesses, the takeaways become a bit more trivial because, all small businesses and all businesses in Maryland will be impacted in some way, whether small or large, by the transition. And those broad, like the takeaways will be more broad brushed if we take that approach. So yeah, and I think we just want to note that this was something that was brought up in the last conversation, that at any level of impact here, we'll be taking into account both the positive and the negative impacts on small businesses. So yeah, just wanted to give that overview to open up the conversation within the working group, and hope this framework helps, direct the conversation a bit.
Thank you, Stephanie. All right, for the work group, as Stephanie noted, we do have some broad parameters that envisioned in the statute. So we have, the other side of that coin is, we have tremendous latitude in what comes out of this work group over the months ahead. With that in mind, I certainly want to seed the water, thinking that what I would suggest we take on is the development of a working document in the days and weeks ahead, with the intent of having some high-level recommendations and direction coming forward for our July meeting. I think it's July 19th. And my hope is that we will develop that collaboratively as a work group over the days ahead. We will circulate, I'll take the responsibility of starting that document, and we can feed into this, and I see that's a potentially very fruitful way for us to creatively work collaboratively and putting meat on these bones, and not only the direction ahead, but absolutely what actionable recommendations we insist upon bringing forward to the broader planning commission by the end of the year. Work group members, any conversation you'd like to have today?
So did she already do the scoping presentation on this day?
Yes, sorry, Senator Augustine?
It says 20 minutes, what happened?
Sorry, it is actually fairly short.
Efficient, it's all about efficiency.
It's good. Who else here?
Well, currently we only have 3 other members present online, and Delegate Chi should be on her way.
Or, and who was it?
Senator Sarah Battisti is on, Stephanie Kane is on, Ryan Powell's on for Commerce. Am I missing anything?
Nope, that's
Okay.
Guy Reed is on behalf of Charles Washington of BGE. He's running late.
Charles Washington is the BGE representative, and Dee is calling for Charles right now
okay.
from BGE.
Okay. All right, the floor is open.
I'm sorry, I just wasn't here.
Yeah.
Just 11:14, can you just recap a little?
Yeah, of course. I mean, if you want to put
Yeah.
the slides up.
Since we have all the way up there.
Yeah, and I think Cindy and Andrew also have some questions that they could pose. But yeah, essentially, I first went through the statutory.
I'm sorry, is Delegate Chi on her way? Is she coming?
Yeah, she should be. We were
Okay,
emailing.
pause,
Yeah.
Yeah.
'cause I mean, it's just, it just makes sense to have her,
Yeah, of course.
so she's a part of it too.
All right.
She probably has she may have some questions or whatever. It wasn't so easy for me to find here. So, it might be a little bit of a challenge to pause a little bit. Sorry.
All right, so for everyone online, we will keep the meeting open, but mute and turn the cameras off and wait Delegate Chi, who we do understand is on her way. We will check back. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, thank you everyone who's online and the room as well for your patience as we've been getting the team together. Again, in place, and we thought best to go back through Stephanie's presentation. It gets all on the same proverbial sheet. So, Stephanie, you're here, and she knows everyone that Delegate She is here as well. And in the original roll calls, Senator Augustine also has kind of instance as well. Director.
Thanks, Andrew. Again, I'm Stephanie Vo. I'm here on behalf of Dr. Kathleen Kennedy and the rest of the research team at the Center for Global Sustainability at the University of Maryland. So I will be giving this presentation that stems out of the conversation that we had at the last working group meeting. First, giving an overview of the statutory language regarding the small business study, getting into the definition of small businesses that we will be using in the study, and then giving an overview of what the definition of transition to renewable energies could mean, just to give a framework to the conversation that the working group will have afterwards. Next slide. So I've just copied and pasted the statutory language on this slide, specifically regarding the small businesses section. We've highlighted the transition to renewable energy to emphasize what is used in the statute. As you can see, I would say 95% says transition to renewable energy, but I know we discussed other sources of energy to take into consideration, and I think that last sort of highlighted text there, transition to renewable energy and new energy sources, opens up that door. And then if we go to the next slide. So this here is showing data that we've gotten from the Census Bureau's statistics of US businesses. We hope to use the US Small Business Administration's definition of small businesses, which they define as generally businesses having fewer than 500 employees. So on this graph, you'll see on the x-axis, the types of industries using the North American Industry Classification System, which is the standard classification system that most folks use for statistical analysis. And then on the y-axis, you'll see the number of firms within each industry within Maryland. And these are color-coded to show how big those businesses are. So the dark purple is 0 to 4, and as you can see, that really dominates most of the industries. And then it goes up all the way to 500 plus employees. And this is using sort of the groupings that the Census Bureau uses. So there is a caveat here. The Small Business Administration actually does use specific size standards for different industries. So there might be an industry where small businesses are classified actually as having less than 750 employees, and we are exploring how to use those size standards. I think we'd have to find more granular data from the Census Bureau and request that. So this definition of small business and what size standard to use is up for conversation. And then another thing to point out at this graph is, looking at those large industries, the professional, scientific, technical services, healthcare, and social assistance is quite large, and that kind of indicates that within Maryland, the service sector is quite large, and that's something to take into consideration in the definition of what transition to renewable energies, like what the scope we want to take there. Do we want to take a very narrow interpretation where it's like what are the very direct impacts, which will be on for example, mining, quarrying, oil and gas extraction, which is a very, very tiny proportion of the number of firms within Maryland. So next slide. So within this slide, Kathleen and I have tried to lay out the different options that the working group has when interpreting what the definition of transition to renewable energy means. So that first bullet point, taking that limited interpretation, transition from renewable energies within small businesses, which would primarily involve deployment of distributed solar, and in ending the use of natural gas and propane and any cost impacts associated with decarbonizing the electric grid, and for small businesses that primarily shows up as a change in price of electricity. But if we widen that scope a bit to consider other energy resources, we could consider on-site energy storage that's coupled with distributed renewables, what we spoke about last time, biofuels, hydrogen, and considering those different types of energy resources outside of just renewables. And then if we take an even broader interpretation of that scope, just taking a little bit, what does it mean for overall electrification of small businesses and any sort of action needed to take to decarbonize the small businesses in Maryland. And we do just want to note as the study team that if we do take this very broad approach of, what is the overall impact of electrification on small businesses, that, the takeaways from that can be a little bit more broad brushed. And that as we take because electrification will affect every small business, will affect small and large businesses, and it kind of waters down what we can provide in the study because we'll have to broaden that outlook. So trying to limit it, obviously, it's up for conversation with the working group, but if we are able to narrow our focus down to a few industries, we'll be able to distill better better results and recommendations. And we also just want to note that at any level of these interpretations, we do want to take into account both positive and negative impacts, which was something that was mentioned in the last working group meeting. So we just wanted to lay this out. Our kind of thoughts around what the definition of transition means for the benefit of the working group, but would like to open up that conversation to all the members.
Totally outside. All right, for the work group. So we all work at, and what does that look like? A couple things come to mind. First of all is, and Senator Augustine and I chatted about whether should we draw a boundary on small businesses or think about this more holistically on the broader economy of Maryland. And if Senator Augustine, you wanted to comment on that.
Well, I think that I'm open to this conversation that we're having right now about it. I think that this, now that we're sort of looking at this here, that it does, I have some questions about the more of the targeting that was discussed. I mean, obviously it was pretty specific on the small business in the statute part. And I think that we also did talk a little bit, Andrew, just about the first step of this group. This is not a one-time thing. So there can also be recommendations that come out of what we do that say that we should be looking beyond just that can be a recommendation, I think, we can talk about obviously, but we should be looking beyond this particular small business renewables, but we should obviously be responsive to the statutory language, I think. So to me, that's on my mind. Additionally on my mind though are in this first one here, the solar, like where are we just looking at renewable and energy, or are we also looking at source of energy? I mean, I'm okay with it. I'm okay for us not to have wind up there, for example. If we're just talking about renewable, the energy part, like not the actual, you know what I'm saying? Because I also am grateful to see the storage up there too, as a part of what we're talking about. I don't know, what are you all thinking about that?
I guess I'll speak to why we only put distributed solar. I think because distributed wind right now is not very big, and if we're thinking about small businesses and what's out there, like we definitely could consider distributed wind, but it's just like a much smaller portion of thinking about distributed energy.
And, I might posit, and this is part of our conversation the other day too, is that I think we're doing a disservice if we don't think about this is a transition, and thinking about and hopefully I'm not running foul of what the legislation want this to do, but I would change the term from renewable to decarbonized, transition from, instead of thinking about it in transition from fossil to renewables, thinking about it as a transition from carbon emitting to non-carbon emitting. And then, for example, what comes to my eye is think about natural gas and propane. Well, if we just think about that as propane is the fossil vehicle choice, then there might be a world in which we're having renewable natural gas or synthetic liquid fuels that are zero carbon. So using hydrogen, for example, as a feedstock and producing synthetic jet fuel or synthetic decarbonized form of propane. So same different vehicle, same attribute, same outcome. And if we didn't speak to that, we didn't put that in our landscape, then we're missing an opportunity that might very well be the case. That there's a propane dealer in Howard County that that's their business, that's their family business, they're a small business. But if we are silent to it, they're saying, look, there's no future for us. We're no longer going to be in the energy business. But if we say, we change that question around and say, this is about what's on the other side of that transition, that there very well may still be the absolute still need for gaseous fuels to be developed, to be delivered to residences and commercial businesses. And that small business will still be business. It will just be a no longer an emitting source of vehicle, but it will be a non-emitting source.
So, I'm sorry, but one more thing on that. There are the two parts. There is the work of being on the energy side, the propane dealer or the person who's in the business of energy right now. I guess I'm just asking if I'm talking out loud. So there's that group, and then there's the impact of energy on business. So it's like two different things. So which one are we doing?
And yeah, I think that's also very much in my mind when looking at the slides. I think we're doing both. I think we have to do both.
Okay.
And that may exceed what the legislature asks for us to do, but
I think I'm good with doing both, but I think we need to write it down in that way. Because I'm not feeling, you know what I'm saying? I'm not seeing it that way. And I'm good with that. But I'm just thinking, and then because then we also then have to assign like how much effort though, because we only have so much effort that they can do. How much effort are we putting on that group? It's relatively speaking a smaller segment of our small businesses versus the construction. We saw in that thing, they were pretty big. And they have a real, energy has a real big role in construction. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So how are we doing that? And how do we provide direction to them about where they should be putting their resource?
yeah, I think what's we're looking. We have to choice today on what we can cover, but I think what I'm hearing is what we should do, and I can take that on, is to formalize what you're suggesting into a scope of work, and then we we present that to the model team that we put together here and saying, all right, can we do this? Do you have the expertise to do this? And what's the cost and time horizon to be able to do that? And then we can slice that bread. And then we can come back and say, yes, this needs to be a version 2.0. And that's a recommendation that we would bring to the, for example, bring to the Climate Commission saying, this is how you have to tackle that solution. And this additional resources, additional time need to be devoted to accomplishing that.
Let me add to the Senator's point. I think you raised a very important point in terms of two-pronged approach, right? And I agree with you that we need to do both. I hope I'm speaking loud enough for people online to be able to hear us. So I think on the one hand, regardless of the industries, we're trying to help all businesses in Maryland to transition to be cleaner energy users, right? And in that scope, there's a whole diversity of industries that we need to be mindful of, either because they are heavily dependent on energy use, like restaurants, they have to cook and all that, right? And biotech and healthcare sectors, reliable energy and dependency on energy is extremely important to regardless of the sources, right? Hopefully it's cleaner and affordable. The other is how to build up quickly a new cleaner energy sector in the state of Maryland so that we are not energy importers, but energy exporters, right? And how our clean tech innovation can catch up to be a national and global leader, hopefully. So this affects a smaller number of players, but it has to be a separate strategy, which is to build a whole new industry and make sure the smaller players also have a seat at the table, a chance at bidding for opportunities or working with whatever bigger players, right? So we have to be mindful in government contracting and all that, So these are two-pronged approach that we need to be doing at the same time, essentially.
So that's absolutely discreet, right? That's what we can do. We should be. I mean, Kathleen's not in the room. Something's happening. But those outputs from this are truly exceptional. And it's, I think I might even think back one further is, could this transition attract businesses, small businesses in America? So sort of future look, not only how is benefits and the costs, impacts on pluses and minuses of existing businesses, but is that an opportunity? I just mentioned renewable or producing synthetic fuels from hydrogen. Maybe that's a business that could be attracted into Maryland, using renewables to produce hydrogen. Or maybe it's natural gas and carbon capture to split up hydrogen. I don't know. But I think that's to your point about what are the opportunities, but not only just to existing, but does this transition give opportunities to the Maryland that's competitive advantage to pursue? That makes sense?
I'm looking forward to the scope. I think once it's written down, it just kind of clarifies our thinking.
I did want to make a quick point that we'll be sending out a survey, and that survey will be our first try at collecting ideas and recommendations. We'll be gathering everything that we get from that survey. You'll have 2 weeks. So say you want to suggest something like, hey, we should have a clean energy definition in Maryland and encourage more generation in Maryland. That could be an example of a recommendation we could consider.
This is Charles.
Hey, Charles.
I had a quick question about scope. And this may actually be more for staff. As we were kind of thinking there, using the propane industry as the example, and wondering whether we are talking about how the commodity impacts, or the changes in commodity for energy impact the business community at large, versus how the energy business itself is impacted. I kind of found myself wondering how we reconcile the work between multiple committees. Like I know that there's a work group that's set up explicitly to talk about the impacts on energy businesses and how they transition their employees or their way of working. So if someone from staff would just kind of share, where there's overlap between committees, how we're thinking through how we reconcile that work and avoid duplication of effort, that would be helpful to me.
Yeah, and that's on my mind as well, that the cross-pollination, because these are hitting these other things like, we're in another silo thinking about that too. So I need to take that as a charge for me to think about how we could facilitate and efficiently cross-pollinate. Whether we have joint meetings, whether we share work product across the work groups.
Can we say it a different way? Andrew, can you just tell us what those other work groups are and what the charges are? Do you all know?
Well, actually, Charles, are you thinking of a BGE working group, or are you thinking of a Climate Change Commission focused connection?
Yeah, I'm thinking of a Climate Change Commission connection. The one that for us, Tanya Terrell is on, Just Transition, I think it's called.
Yeah, so I can speak to that working group because I'm actually leading that working group. It's a completely separate working group. So there's actually a meeting that will occur next week if you wanted to learn more about just transition efforts in the clean energy space. That'll be the focus of that meeting. But in terms of your specific question regarding, I'm not sure I caught it. Was it a definition question or just general kind of engagement?
For us, I think what he's saying, and I'm with him on that, I still am not exactly sure what that's going to do. What is it going to do? That's your staff.
Yeah, the Just Transition Working Group?
Yeah, what's it going to do? What's its charge?
So each working group has the same, each new working group, including this one, has the same 2 deliverables. 1, recommendations to the Climate Change Commission. So I mentioned a survey, that'll be our first kind of try at gathering ideas and recommendations in written format to give to the commission for consideration and inclusion in the annual report, as is done every year for every working group for the Climate Change Commission. Second deliverable is the study. So right now we're talking about the study for the purposes of trying to right size it to meet your desires for this working group. The Just Transition Working Group is doing the same process, is having conversations, is engaging members, is starting the collection of recommendations, and you'll be hearing on that as we go along through that working group. I'm sorry, did I answer your question?
Do you mean the specific?
So like for us, we're on this group
Yes.
and we're looking at, it's like renewable small business.
Right.
Like I can just boil it down to those 2 words.
Yes.
Like that's what we're doing and we're trying to figure out how to do that. So I'm trying to understand what the other ones are in like 3 words or 5 words or less.
I'm sorry, we tried to do that during the first meeting where we outlined all of the different new working groups. I can give you the broad overview. So the Climate Change Commission originally had 4 working groups. One is adaptation and resilience, a little bit more focused, it's managed by DNR, focus on kind of more water issues historically, looking at planning efforts, just a wide range of adaptation issues. Mitigation working group is the one that MDE has historically kind of focused a little bit more on. Is asking very important, very critical questions regarding greenhouse gas mitigation efforts. Education and communications, very focused on just that, educational communications efforts. Science and technical is the last one that has been kind of around for a while. The 4 new working groups are this one, energy, industry, revitalization, energy, resilience, and efficiency, which just met this morning, also created this year.
But what is it? What is, I mean, you say the
Yes.
name, but what is that?
Yeah, and I'll speak to the resilience and energy efficiency one. So that's going to look at how to make sure the lights don't go out with the transition. So digging down a little bit, so it asks you've got all this demand side stuff coming up. You got heat pumps and electric vehicles, but it also comes with that like bidirectional charging and smart meters and all that stuff. So on that side, and then you've got and beneficial electrification and a lot of new stuff coming up, data centers. Are there guardrails? So one of the questions has to be answered that groups can look at is, what are the guardrails? Are the guardrails that we have in place to make sure the lights haven't gone out historically, are they sufficient to protect the system from blackouts and brownouts? And can we say something of value about there's holes, there's regulatory holes, because yesterday's energy system is not today's or tomorrow's energy system. And as part of that, you've got to model what you think's going to arrive, when. You know, how many electric vehicles are going to arrive in Howard County next year, and how many heat pumps in Queens. So that's got to be the underlying scenario that you've got to then, all this has got to tease out, is to stress test the regulatory framework to ensure that not cratering the system as we work through this transition.
Andrew used the term brave new world, and if I had to dial down the Just Transition Working Group, it's that we go into this brave new world and truly not leave anyone behind.
Yeah. Okay, so the reason why I appreciate Charles bringing it up, because we just, in here, like we said, we talked about the small businesses that are they going to be a subsection of that group? Those propane dealers who need to be transitioned, are they actually, is that a part of what you all are doing over there?
Yes.
Because if it is, it's just, that's where we wouldn't necessarily want to see duplication.
Yeah.
If that is the case.
I think they are discrete,
Okay.
but I think we both need to know, or all three, or et cetera, needs to have visibility across these silos. So, because, for example, the resilience and efficiency work group is going to be illustrating some of these constraints or opportunities. So, is there going to be an opportunity for more renewable power in 2027 or 2028, whatever you choose? And so that the small business side, we're looking through, we're looking through this say, yeah, there's an opportunity out there, or there is not an opportunity out there. Or how much, are there going to be 100,000 new gas source heat pumps, or 3 million? So is that an opportunity for small business installers or manufacturers? Because now there's going to be a demand for that stuff, and just spitballing, but that's, I think, why it's really useful to see that granular work that these other groups are doing, because it does feed over into what this landscape looks like when we're looking through it through this lens. But I think if small businesses don't have a voice here, if we are not the voice now of the guys of those businesses, then they're not going to be clearly entertained. I think what we're doing here is empowering that voice to be heard.
Katie had her hand up too for a moment. She put it back down. Did you put it back down, Katie? So.
And commerce is on.
All right. Another question I had, while we're, if it's okay, that it's like, when you talk about, just going back to the carbon free, so that it brings in like nuclear, so I mean, what is that going to be a part of the conversation?
Yeah, I would speak for at the risk of speaking for the work group. I think it has to be. I think if we're not, we're not showing the whole landscape. We're sort of blinding ourselves. We're just for example, if the energy resilience and work group comes back and says, yeah, we recommend that there should be statutes to facilitate small modular reactors to state. Well, that's a good thing to know for small businesses, because there's a lot of small businesses who could say, yeah, that, to my point, that that's the decarbonizing. It's not renewable, but it's the transition to a decarbonized economy. And there's small businesses out there that are providing concrete or electricians or road building or all the ancillary stuff that restaurants that could benefit from job creation in specific places. To me, that's all I think that was the point you were making, is that we should be broadly thinking about small business and impacts and benefits, not just, oh, somebody going to put solar panels on the roof. And the flip side of that is electricity going to be more expensive? So is that a potential impact that particularly impacts small businesses who may be constrained to adapt? Or is energy efficiency? It's important for there to be statutory language to support energy efficiency transition in small businesses to offset, to mitigate the impact of this transition. Interesting. And just throwing stuff out there. Could small businesses adopting battery storage then allow them to be bi-directional, and now they're in the energy business. So their benefit, that to me, that's very direct, one-hand move for the potential benefits that small businesses can take advantage of.
If you're saying decarbonization instead of like electrification to keep it more broad as far as the opportunities and things like that.
I don't think so. I just think that's just much better product for us to come through. And if you're a taxi company and you transition to electric taxis, electric vehicles, well, now you've got all those batteries, and maybe they're charging at night, and then they can be called upon during the day to be responsive for peak shaving. That could be a very remunerative business model. Or maybe not. Maybe possible, maybe not.
And then, not to play it down, but just to have a conversation. And are we talking about technologies that are commercial now, or are we thinking, about broader? I mean, I'm asking, like, are they going to, as we're trying to sort of forecast out impact on small business, what direction are we providing to the team along those lines?
Yeah, the conversation we've already had, I think, with them implies that we would be looking future-proofing this, that we'd be looking at time horizons in 2030, 2035. And so you're incorporating what we think might be arriving and when it might be arriving. Small movie, reactors, for example. And to think about the taxi piece, taxi company, if we are saying we're looking at the whole impacts of the whole transition, then that small business may be under significant risk that the wires may not be able to provide them with the power for their 30 fleet of taxis to charge at 2 o'clock in the morning. So to me, that's illustrative of a very clear potential risk that we may want to write regulations to mitigate.
And is it cost constrained or is it not? Does it assume support from the federal government, the state? Like, I mean, or I mean, are we asking that too?
Yeah, I think that's turn that around. I think that would be our obligation to, as a recommendation, that there needs to be funding to support this.
Can I ask a question, an administrative or procedural question? It's related to the discussion about which work group is focusing on what. I assume there is more of a holistic plan that lays out the charge of each work group. And about the same time, each work group is supposed to produce a survey and a study, right? So is the same team of staff staffing all of them so you can look at everything holistically, or talking to each other if not? And who's going to compile everything to make sure they have not too much duplication, but as there's some cohesion as well, right? I hope there's a good amount of overlapping in our work so that we can actually help each other because they are all very related.
Yeah, I would say that that's one of the benefits of working with the University of Maryland. The University of Maryland is supporting all of the new working groups, and Stephanie in particular is our coordinator and is aware of all the different charges of all the different studies. So we are thinking holistically, but each working group is independent. So each working group has the power to not recommend or recommend. And it's up to the actual members to put forward what they would like to see in either the recommendations. And then separately, again, is the study itself that is independent. And we are going to try our best to think holistically about how we're approaching the parameters of the study. But that's a conversation we can continue to have as we go along in the working group.
So conceivably, at some point, when you look at everything, all the working groups products, there could be conflicting or confusing recommendations from different factions, right? Depending on the diversity of voices we have at the table, which is the whole point. Somebody has to police all of them to make sure.
That's us. That's
Yeah.
FDE.
Okay.
So
But it's also, it's the climate change commission, right, as well.
Yes.
I mean, yes, in the practical sense of the day-to-day,
Yeah.
You would hope, and we are, pollinating across the office, that we all have our desks are within walking distance of each other, we're attending each other's meetings and so on. So that's clearly an obligation, and I'm sure that does occur. So that does do that day-to-day crosswalk of what people are working on. But then to your point about that, the obligation of this work group is to think about it from this lens and be advocate for this. And that's what we will, nobody's gonna be influencing the outcome of what we bring forward. What we bring forward absolutely is directly from us to the Climate Commission. Nobody's editing that on the way.
So we have 13 members on this board, right? I counted. I would love to hear more from the businesses at the table, virtually or otherwise, what they actually face, their challenges.
You mean small businesses or?
Yeah.
They didn't put a person on here. Yeah, I did.
That's it.
No, they.
Work in progress.
Separate conversation.
Yeah, work in progress.
Yeah.
But, yeah,
From a
and,
small business standpoint, but there are energy, stakeholders who are on there. As I look who's up there, it's primarily energy stakeholders, right?
commerce is on too.
Okay.
My pals on today. Yeah, so, yeah, would it be the will of the committee, work group to bring in presenters on these, give us
Your business, yeah, because our focus is on businesses, right? Helping this small business transition. And you can see 97% of businesses in Maryland are small. If you use 500 employee as a benchmark, most of them don't apply. I mean, the vast majority of Maryland businesses are under 50. 500 is huge for Maryland businesses. We don't have many. So, if we are cognizant of that, then we'll use the county to lens in terms of what kind of businesses.
So something that I could offer, BGE BGE's economic development team maintains a small business roundtable that we usually bring into conversations to get their feedback on our own programs. We'd be happy to, if it worked for staff and for the committee members, to bring kind of a subgroup of that roundtable in and kind of bounce ideas off them and get their feedback on what we're working on and what we're talking back about, if that would kind of help to provide some small business feedback.
We'll take you up on that. That was a unanimous vote to support that. Brian, can I put you on the spot? Does Commerce have a perspective on this?
Do you have a specific question that you have like that you want to know about?
Yeah. So if to Delegate's point, question is, do you have the in-house insights into the small business implications across the whole range of small businesses? What this transition might mean, the costs and benefits, opportunities, or could you steer us towards those who can speak to that?
I think that's going to be a complicated question. It's going to be different for each different business. I think if you want to tackle this, you would have to divide this out. I think there's feedback in the room happening, at least I hear on my end. There we go. So I think you would have to divide this out into different sectors and met it out to different people that work into it, because there's no universal answer. As you were talking about before, how this would affect a propane dealer is going to be different than how it would affect, a large firm or a medium-sized firm. So I think, there's no universal answer to this. It just has to be, divided out and researched for each of those different sectors.
If I'm reading you correctly, Commerce hasn't done that. I'm not being critical, not putting you on the spot, but Commerce doesn't have that at your fingertips, right?
No, not to my knowledge.
Do you think, so one further question, do you think we can wrap our heads around that and come up with what is a pretty good cross-section? Or
I think, like I said, this really depends on the scope of what you want to go after and which industries you want to get to and how far down you want to dig. Like I said, there's not a universal answer for this, I think. That's why I think some organization around what's actually going to be answered would be helpful versus kind of tackling this in a piecemeal fashion.
All right, so why don't I take it on with the will of the commission, of the work group? Can I sit down with you, Ryan, or somebody in your shop this coming week, and maybe start to frame this up and see where we get?
Yeah, feel free to reach out and shoot me some dates and times, and we can get something on the books.
Just to that point, I understand Congress may not have a list as an out, but I think this is an important conversation to have, because we need to have some good handle on data in terms of what are the leading industries in America that are driving our economic growth, right? Those tend to be high tech and industries of the future, advanced manufacturing, R&D heavy, which is capital intensive kind of businesses. A lot of them have their labs, which use a tremendous amount of energy, right? So I think Congress should have some handle on that, which is what are the narrows in industries that are heavy energy users that we should have at the table for such conversations, other than those brick and mortar industries that every community has, which is like retail and restaurants and those kind of service shops, right? And the other is, breaking down who are the heavy energy users among those leading industries, right? And I think we already have those industry-based associations that we can just, reach out and say, send us a representative, if you want to say this. I don't think it should be a tall order. Any chambers of commerce can help, and certainly commerce can look into that.
Okay. Yeah.
I have a question for Delegate Chief. When you say leading industries, do you mean like leading by, the amount of money that they bring to the state, or like the number of employees that they have in the state? Like, what do you mean by
Yeah,
that?
I think commerce can help actually in terms of determining their revenue size, their employment size, those kind of things. Like with Maryland, everybody knows Maryland is leading nationally as a biotech hub, right? And that is an industry sector that is both heavy in employment and capital investment. So certainly, that is a major industry sector that we should look at in terms of relevancy to the energy discussion.
Yeah, I will just note, I think that was really helpful. I will just note that we did reach out to Commerce for business data. Unfortunately, they used, at least for the data dashboard that we saw on the Commerce website, they use a third-party data provider that we can't get access to. So we'll be trying to figure out like how we can work around getting access.
Secretary, we'll call you Secretary.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see.
Did you say which ones you were going to work on? I missed it.
I just had a clarifying question about which were the leading industries, and then also just noted that we did try to get access to the data that Department of Commerce.
Can we put that one up again in the slide
Which slide?
that had the industries?
Oh, the graph. Yeah. This is not from the Department of Commerce, but the Department of Commerce does have like a website with all the small businesses and like a nice little graphic and dashboard. But unfortunately, we weren't able to directly access that data because they used a third-party data provider for that. So we're looking into how to.
But my question kind of like to the group is, there's like a clump, the professional services, are we talking about that? I mean, it's significant, obviously, for us in that cluster. And then there's
Kicked out.
We have 2 minutes.
So,
Yeah, we're
We
still.
are still on.
so puppeteers.
That's curious.
All right, so where will we start?
Yeah. It's just, again, sort of like providing sort of guidance to the for the study of are we thinking about them in that significant, because it is significant to us here, professional services, or is that not an area that we feel should be an area of concentration for them? Is construction, should, because you can't do it all, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Right.
So what are we thinking as a suggestion about that?
My take would be
Energy heavy?
Energy heavy users.
So good
should be
place.
our concentration, right?
All right.
R&D concentrate. Competence.
All right.
Hospital.
That makes sense.
Advanced manufacturing, and restaurants. Those are the ones that I think of off my mind. Office services is a huge, diverse cluster, but the trend right now since the pandemic is many people work from home.
That's true.
So they are shrinking their office footage, and their people can be anywhere, working remotely, right? So we can look into that.
Yeah, I think, I'm coming back, we're actually still, everything.
Yes, yes,
To take, cartoonish, but taking that table, and we can identify which are the energy heavy segments, and which are the ones that potentially have the greatest opportunity.
Okay.
There may be somewhere there's just no opportunity out there, but I think that would be really insightful.
Yeah.
We could,
Yeah, I'm in agreement. I just felt, that we should definitely try to ask them to do, or whomever, to do that in the scoping. In line with what EIRWG was saying for sure. I think that's right. Yeah.
And I would recommend that in trying to bring those different industry sectors or voices to consider players like prop tech, kind of players in the market, because they know, especially in this new economic dynamic post-pandemic, they know how the companies are configuring their space and energy use and all of that, and how technologies drive those kind of decisions. Property tax, property technology, prop tech. So that's a whole new cluster should look into that. Could be very insightful because they are staying on top of or ahead of the market.
perfect, very good. We're against the deadline here. We have public comment period through the end of until 12:30. If there's comments from those in the room or online, please raise your hand and I will call upon you. Jeff Silva, you raise your hand.
I did. Can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you.
All right, with your permission, I'll continue with my comment.
Please go ahead, Jeff, do you hear us?
I hear you.
And can you identify who you are, where you're from?
My name is Jeff Silva. And I've been attending all the different work group meetings for the MCCC and also the MCCC's meetings since 2018. Thank you very much for this opportunity. I've had a chance to take a look at your slideshow, and I have to say it's pretty good, but I want you to recognize the magnitude of your group's ability to change the consequences of man-made destabilized climate. Your definition of small business slide prompts me to direct your attention to the industries of accounting and insurance. We should combat climate destruction using economic fulcrums that will obtain oversized greenhouse reductions from Maryland's use of our state regulated money. I mention insurance because Maryland's insurance administration allows insurance or insurers to invest Maryland's insurance policy payments into stocks and bonds of fossil fuel companies. Insurance protection takes the policyholder's risk of storms from localities across the nation and spreads their local damage costs across a larger population that lives in the unaffected areas. We all recently have seen the flooding damage that's going on in Florida, and it's only going to escalate the cost of our insurance here. Fossil fuel businesses profit from their climate pollution that make atmospheric calamities more intense, more widespread, lengthens their duration, increases the recovery difficulties in the shortage of rebuilding materials and such, and it takes more lives. The insurance industry then increases policy premiums paid by small businesses to own or rent property in a vehicle to receive more cash flow to cover their future storm damage payouts. Soon, Maryland citizens and small businesses will not be able to afford the higher insurance costs required for obtaining a loan or having a car or a business building. For no government dollars, Maryland's Assembly can write the necessary guidance legislation to authorize Maryland's Insurance Administration to halt our premiums from funding the industry that profits from causing Maryland's climate and weather distresses. Our premiums are currently almost $14 billion total of state-regulated money. That's right, it's overseen by the Maryland Insurance Administration. Please tell the state to legislate instructions to our insurance administration to halt insurance investments in fossil fuel companies. Also, the other industry that slide brought to mind was accounting. And the field of accounting only counts what the businesses have consumed, not what it saves. The unused resources remain in the commons, and to the accountant, those resources have no value. Yet, the unburned resources that remain unused are increasingly important for your children's ability to survive a possible inconsolable climate upheaval. Your positions of authority must be leveraged to change the accounting standards to include the crucial climate components that all businesses, large and small, if to manage to avoid consuming in their operations. You're definitely.
George, I've got to leave the time left for others as well. Thank you very much for your comment. And if you'd like, you can also provide it to us in writing, if that would be helpful.
Thank you very much.
Thank you,
I certainly will.
Anyone else? All right, thank you very much. Seeing none, I will adjourn this meeting for today and look forward to our next meeting on, I believe, the 19th of July. Thank you again.
Thank you.